Hi, it's Carrie again with another episode of Gardenside Chats. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about transplanting. So somebody, or maybe a couple people asked about how you transplant in your garden. So we thought we would cover that topic today. So let's dive right in. This is going to be a great week for transplanting spring things. It's still too early for tomatoes and peppers, although it's warm right now. It's still too early. People always start itching at this time of year to plant your tomatoes, but resist the urge. But it'll be great to still plant some spring stuff. Last week was kind of cold still, so wasn't a great week to transplant last week. We dipped below freezing a couple nights, which is kind of a shocker. When the temperature fluxes up and down like that, going just below 32 for even these cool hardy things can be pretty tough. So take advantage of the nice weather this week and the forecast for rain that we have for the end of the week, and you should have a good successful week for transplanting in your garden. So the first step to successful transplanting is successful hardening off. So these are some things that I've started in another garden side chat back in March when we went over how to start things in your living room. So I've got some kale, some Toscano kale, and like a little yogurt container. We went over that during that garden side chat, so feel free to stop by and visit that one. I've got some lettuce that's doing pretty good. I have some cilantro looking good, and then I have Swiss chard. Like if I were just going by my calendar, I would have wanted to start hardening these off last week, but I thought it was too cold to be successful, so I chose to wait one more week, and this week is when I'm going to start hardening off. So what does that even mean? Hardening off is when you take these plants that you started in your house or that were started in a nursery or something, and kind of start moving them slowly out into kind of the real world. So nursery center, a greenhouse, your living room, wherever these plants were started, that environment was pretty controlled by humans. So most likely there was just the right amount of air circulation provided by a fan that was blowing at the same rate for the same amount of hours every day, or a very controlled amount of light, either through grow lights or the greenhouse with some shade cloth. Temperature, of course, through heating at night and even during the day, covering the plants up at night on particularly cool nights. So you get the idea, very controlled. If you were to take some plants that just went from that environment and plop them in your garden, you might have success, but usually you would experience what's called transplant shock, which is when a plant is in shock because it's moved from one place to another, and the difference between the two places is just too extreme. Usually transplant shock manifests itself in wilting, older leaves dying back, turning yellow, turning other colors, sometimes purple, and just actually kind of like stunted growth. Like it might just spend a couple weeks just getting its bearings and not growing at all. So kind of your goal is to minimize transplant shock. So one way to minimize transplant shock is to do hardening off right. So in my case, I have a birch tree in my backyard that's not fully leafed out right now. So I put these things that I have growing in my living room currently under a grow light. I put them under the birch tree this morning. So it's not fully leafed out, which is an important detail because it's providing a good amount of sunlight, but still a little bit of dappled shade. So it's a little less intense than just kind of throwing them out in full sunlight. This lettuce in particular is so delicate that I do fear the wind whipping its little leaves or it getting sunburned really easily. It's just so fragile right now that I really want to play it cool and kind of like really step them up into the real world. So they're going to live under the birch tree today. I'm going to bring them in tonight. Tomorrow I might put them a little farther away from the birch tree, get a little more sunlight. Same thing, bring them in at night. Wednesday, leave them outside. Maybe they got rained on. Maybe the wind will hit them a little bit. So kind of like every day, do something that's going to stress them out a little bit more. And over the course of a week, 10 days, they should be ready to be transplanted into your garden. So that was step one, hardening off, step one. It's a very important process. Try not to skip it. Step two is prepping the soil. So you can either do this while you are hardening off your plants if you want to be super efficient, or you know that your plants are hardened off and you're ready to transplant them that day, you're going to get your soil ready. So I'm going to plant some stuff in this patch right here. This is one of my garden beds. I use a lot of leaves in our garden, so that's why there's so many leaves. That's my preferred form of mulch. So I got my Katuchi, which I think I can't sing the praises highly of enough of. It's my favorite garden tool of all time. So I'm just using the Katuchi to scrape back kind of some of my leaf mulch, kind of clear the top of the soil. Pretty simple. I'll just do this section, it's easier for me. Okay, so I don't know if you can see in the video, but I do have some weeds. They're going to be really small. It's going to be hard to see them. But we have kind of an infestation of what's called Asiatic dayflower. And this is the beginnings of the Asiatic dayflower. All these little green guys. So they're really young right now, so it's really easy to kill a whole bunch of them, which is great. It's kind of a pretty flower, but it's a hard weed to kill. It's kind of a tender plant, so it did kind of like experience a setback with these cold evenings we just had. Okay, so I'm just kind of using my gardening tool to kind of, I got a root under there that I'll just leave, kind of like kill all of the young weeds that I don't want growing in this area. There's a lot of, it's easier to do it when the weeds are small, so always try to like encourage yourself to do weeding when the weeds are young. Nobody likes weeding, but it feels a lot better to weed when you have little tiny weeds versus great big mature weeds. Okay, so now it is kind of wet. This is kind of a wet part of my garden, so I'm just going to kind of break up some of the clods a little bit. But since I'm transplanting and not direct seeding, I don't have to worry about little kind of clods here and there, because I'm not trying to get a really what we call fine seed bed for good like seed to soil contact with when you're direct seeding. So this is kind of missed the spot right here that I'll get right. There we go. This is a good enough demonstration for a couple things, I think. Okay, so that's section 2, or step 2 is preparing your soil. Step 1, hardening off. Step 2, preparing your soil, getting all the weeds out, you know, getting last year's crop out if you still need to do that. Just get it ready for transplanting. Step 3 is you want to dig your hole. So let's start right here. So I'm just going to dig a little hole. These are what I'm planting today, these collard greens. So this is how deep the roots go. So I want to dig a hole at least that deep. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it right now. Lots of worms. Okay. So here's an important step. So you want the hole to be at least as big or as deep as the container the plant's growing in, and you want it just a little bit deeper. So I think I've got a good enough hole right now. I'll make it deeper if I need to. So here comes the kind of tricky part. Getting the plant out of one of these like cell packs. This is a 6 cell pack. Often they're 4 cell packs, but at any rate, it can kind of be tricky. So the first step to get them out is you want to make sure they're nice and wet. So these are already really well watered. So I've already got that step done. Then what you're gonna do is kind of like flip it over, and you're gonna kind of squeeze the bottom, but when you flip it over, it becomes the top of the cell, kind of like this on both sides. You don't want to like be too, like, just be delicate, you know. It's a young plant. You don't have to like prove anything. So you're just kind of squeezing it, and as you're kind of squeezing it from the bottom, you take the stem in your hands, between your thumb and your index finger, and you just kind of start pulling. Oh, perfect. Now, if you time everything right, what it should come out is like 1 cube of soil, because the roots have totally grown through the cube of soil and are kind of like holding it all together. So these are looking pretty good. White roots are a good sign. These are white roots. Brown or kind of tan roots can indicate mildewing or molding. So the fact that they're white is good. So now that you got it out of the container, you kind of squeeze the whole cube on all 4 sides, just gently kind of breaking up the root mass and the potting mix. So nothing too vigorous. You know, again, this is like really stressful for the plant, so just be gentle. All right. So I got it kind of mixed up. There's lots of roots down here, so I'm going to kind of like tease those out gently. All right. That's looking pretty good. So now this is what I've got. So now I'm going to put it in the hole that I made, and I want to totally cover up the soil that the potting mix, it's not growing in soil, the potting mix that it's growing in. So I'm going to cover it up until like this first leaf right here. So I'm going to cover it up another 3/4 of an inch or so. So I want the hole to be that much deeper. So it looks like I need to dig a little bit deeper hole. Looks pretty good. All right, so now I just got my hole, kind of set the plant down in it, like so. You want to make sure the hole's diameter is wider than the cube of potting mix that you're planting. That's not soil. And so now I'm just going to kind of break up some clods, put this worm back, these worms back, and around it. You want to make sure that you fill all air pockets with soil, because roots don't like big old honking air pockets. They don't grow through the air. So you do want to make sure that there's a good amount of soil contacting all of the roots in the block that the plant's growing in. So you kind of, to do that, you fill it in, and then after you fill it in a certain amount, you just kind of gently but firmly press it down. So I'll fill it in just a little bit more. Around the plant, I want to make sure that I kind of break up the clods, but I don't need to do that in my whole bed if I'm just transplanting. There. Okay, perfect. And there's my plant. So it might be a difficult thing to see in the video, but something I would like to point out is I planted this plant a little bit deeper than what it's growing. One, for stability of the plant. And 2, I dug the hole a little bit deeper so that where the plant is sitting, it's a little bit lower than like the average surface, I guess, of the bed. So there's a slight slope towards the plant. That will help with watering, and like rain, like when it's raining, it will kind of funnel some water to the plant and help it get more drinks. You don't want it higher, because that's just going to slough all the water off. You want it a shallow basin to collect around the plant. Great. So the next thing I will do...
Is that for anything you plant, or just...
Yeah, and that goes pretty much for anything that you want to plant. You want to plant just like you know, I'm talking like fractions of an inch lower than the rest of the bed, just to kind of like gently collect water around. And hopefully you'll be able to see that with step 6, which is watering. So I'm going to turn my hose on. This also, like, I don't want to blast it. It's very stressful for this plant's life. It's a huge life event. So don't, you know, don't like kill it with love. Just do a little bit. I'm only going to turn mine on like a quarter of full force. And so you can kind of see, maybe I'll do a little more. See that the water is kind of running towards the plant. That's kind of what we want. And you want to give it a nice long drink because watering will kind of help ease the shock for the plant. So you definitely want to water it really well. Water this worm too. All right. Another thing that we often do when we transplant, and this will help with transplant shock, is we give them some fertilizer. I don't actually have any on me right now, but we'll do a kind of a diluted rate of like a liquid organic fertilizer. Usually ours is like fish based, so it's a little bit stinky. But that always kind of helps it, you know, kind of get back on its feet. So you can do that in addition to watering at the same time. You just get a watering can, put a little bit of fertilizer in the watering can, and then you water your plants after you transplant them. And that does a lot of help for the plant. Something I will do though is I'm going to min the soil around where I planted this plant. So this is like fertilizer, although it's what I'm going to put on it is a little bit slower release. For success with in combating transplant shock, you can do like a quicker release fertilizer, and that will kind of give it a little burst of nutrients to kind of get through this first stressful week after being transplanted. What I've got is two kind of granular, slower release fertilizers or soil amendments that are organic and based off of like plant and animal byproducts that will kind of last for most of the season. So I'm just going to kind of sprinkle that around my plant. And if I had planted a whole bed, I would just do the whole bed. You can get a lot of really good organic fertilizers from, you can get them from Westlakes, you can get them from Wilson's Garden Center. There's a garden center on Vandiver Drive that's good for organic fertilizers. I think it's called Lakeview Nursery or something. So anyway, so did that. Okay, so then the last step in, I mean, it could go actually before the mending, but with transplanting, you want to make sure that you don't really do thinning when you transplant. You want to transplant things where they're going to grow for the rest of the year. So you then want to make sure that you space your next hole adequately in relation to your first hole. So since these are collard greens, we do those about, you can do them about a foot apart. So from one stem to the next, so this will be the middle of my next hole where my finger is. So then I just repeat the process all over again. Then I dig the hole, make sure it's deeper and wider than the cube that the plant's in. I'll do this again, I'll do it sped up for your benefit. Here's a hole that I think is deeper and definitely wider. I'm going to kind of invert my soil pack, kind of squeeze the bottom on all four sides, kind of pull it out while I'm squeezing. There is my soil cube. This leaf is looking pretty rough, so I'm just going to actually pinch it off right at the main trunk of the plant and toss it to the side. I'm going to kind of squeeze it on all four sides, gently kind of loosening up those roots, kind of trying to loosen up the roots on the bottom. All right. Need my hole just a little bit deeper. There we go. Put my plant in the hole, put the worms back in the hole. Kind of crumble up the topsoil as I kind of backfill the hole around the the cube of potting mix. Gently and firmly press it around. Fill the hole so that the soil is level with the bottom two leaves. Kind of firmly press it. I've got my nice gentle slope in a shallow dish around the plant. I'm going to water it, or I add some liquid fertilizer, some quick release liquid fertilizer right now. Water it really good because it's stressful. Like so. Usually I want to make sure that it's wet down to your middle knuckle, and let's let it absorb real quick. All right, it's pretty much absorbed. And so you can see that it's wet down to definitely my middle knuckle, I think maybe more. So I'm gonna kind of push that hole back down. All right, and then onward. Just here's my next hole.
Fertilizer.
Yeah. So if I were planting a whole bunch of collard greens at once, I would just do the amending with kind of the longer term soil amendments all at once. But I'm going to add them around this individual plant since I already did it for the first plant. So, all right. So that's kind of the quick and painless transplanting demonstration. How would I take care of these for the next few days? I would come out definitely every day, at least every day, just to check on them. I wouldn't be totally surprised if I saw some yellowing on the lower leaves or didn't see much in the way of like growth for the next week. But I want to make sure they're really well watered. Another really key point to all of this is when you choose to do this. So this is a great afternoon to be spending transplanting because it is pretty overcast right now. It was sunnier this morning, but now it's pretty cloudy. You definitely don't want to do this on like a really sunny, really hot, or really windy day, or a day that's all three of those things, because that's just too much stress on the plant. Even if they're well hardened off and you water them really well. A lot of times people choose to transplant their things in the evening when the sunlight's gentler and it's less hot. So that's always a really good time to choose, or kind of an overcast day is another good time. Or even a day that's just lightly raining is a really good time to do some transplanting. But just want to make sure not to choose the hottest, windiest, sunniest day and the middle of the hottest, windiest, sunniest day to transplant. All right, well, good luck with transplanting any of the plants in your garden. Please let us know if you have any questions or comments, or if you want to hear any more content from us. We're always eager to hear your guys' feedback on what you guys want to learn about gardening. As always, please like, plant, and subscribe to watch more of our content, or visit our website, columbiaurbanag.org, to learn more about our mission and all of our programs here in Columbia. Again, thanks for joining us today, and happy gardening. See you later.